All right. Well, I'm here with Caitlin, and I've got the first story, which I was very interested. I had no idea that any of this was possible. Early puberty has surged during the pandemic in girls, and they, from rat experiments, they claim this is actually coming from the blue light from looking at screens all the time. And I've been hearing for years about blue light blockers, and I thought it was just garbage. And but apparently it's true that these LED screens we're looking at do put out a lot of blue light, and they have shown that that blue light does have significant effects on changing the timing of puberty in rats and perhaps also in humans. So I'm thinking maybe I should be wearing blue light blocking glasses when I spend my whole life staring at a computer monitor. Apparently, this is not garbage after all, or at least that's a possibility. So it sounded ridiculous to me, but I'm taking another look at it. Uh, anyway, then Caitlin's got, oh yeah, Signal.
Yeah, Signal is put out a statement straight from signal.org asking people to set up proxies for Signal. Apparently, the people in Iran are having a bunch of protests right now over the wearing of hijabs. So essentially, it's a feminist protest, and they Signal officially put out a statement saying, "Hey, if you want to get past the censors, here's how to set up a proxy, and here's how not to get banned." And so they recommend they actually have like uh, a Docker container set up ready to go that you can install on any Linux server, and it will act as a proxy to the Signal service. But what they recommend though is to send it over like private channels, like DMs to people and stuff, so it doesn't get widely noticed by the authorities. So if you have friends in Iran who need to connect to Signal, Signal, their website signal.org has a not only recommends creating a proxy, but they have the full instructions ready to go.
Yep, they're easy to do. I did it this morning, but nobody's interested yet. Well, at least one guy said they blocked the DNS in Iran, so this is actually not going to work. But I don't
Could
know.
you not like use the IP of the server?
Well, their instructions don't include that option, and I can't test them because their instructions will only work for the Android app, apparently.
Ah,
So I don't know. I set one up because it doesn't cost much, and I'll let it run a couple months and see if anybody cares. But I'm not really sure how many of my followers are protesting in Iran or know somebody who is. But anyway, we'll see if it does any good. All right. Anyway, I was really surprised by this one, but then I think I understood what happened here. There was a Python bug found 15 years ago in a decompression library for tar files, the tar file package. Somebody reported, hey, this tar file decompressor doesn't check for directory traversal. It just believes any file name you put in the package and overwrites that file. So you could overwrite system files and files you shouldn't do and gain code execution. And they notified these guys in 2007, and they just closed the bug a week later and said, "Fine, we just added a sentence to the documentation. Don't untar untrusted files. There, that's all we're going to do." And and then they never did anything. Now, 15 years later, this is built into hundreds of thousands of applications, and the latest research has made a bunch of videos demonstrating totally taking over machines of various conditions. And they say that they expect maybe 70,000 of them to be patched within a few weeks because they made forks of all these GitHub projects with the patch. And they're trying to get the maintainers to listen. But I'm sure many projects have just been abandoned and the maintainers are not paying attention to the emails or anything. So, and I'm thinking in retrospect, this is all quite understandable because back then, when you made a vuln report, nobody knew what to do. And I think especially in a lot of the Linux community, I remember there were a lot of vulns reported and they say, well, that's not our problem. We don't care about security. We only care about functionality. So we'll just put a note in the documentation. Don't use it for critical missions or something like that. That was considered an acceptable response 15 years ago. So this kind of reminds me back to the same old thing I often come to: supply chains. How much junk are you using? How old is it? Is somebody really maintaining it? Are they up to modern standards, or are they doing what was cool 20 years ago? Anyway, so that's an interesting one. And let's go back to you with Shameware.
Yeah, so Wired has an article talking about the rise of a new type of software called Shameware. So we've heard of spyware. Shameware does the same thing, except that you know the person who's spying on you, and the whole point is that they're spying on you to make sure that you are properly obedient to the group. So in particular, this is used in a lot of very conservative, Christian cults essentially that want to make sure that their members are not watching pornography, for example, on their phone, or doing anything that would be ungodly, like allowing women to vote, things like that. So they put this, people, congregations and stuff, put this software on their phone, and it's part of a like something called Covenant Eyes. And it then sends not only are you visiting porn sites, yes or no, but actual screenshots of your phone, so they know exactly what you're doing. They send it to somebody in your community, sort of like nanny apps, like parents monitoring your device. But it's specifically set up for, like I said, churches, cults, etc., to shame members into behaving. So this is becoming more widespread. And also a large business. They're making a lot of money off these apps because apparently it's a big thing in America to feel shame and guilt over how you use your personal devices in the comfort of your own home. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think also, I saw an art that they took it out of the Google Play Store after this article came out.
Yeah.
So that may decrease their revenue stream if anybody actually pays for an Android app. Anyway.
I can't. Yeah, that is so funny that people are actually paying to put this on their phone and have people monitor them and keep them from using their phone the way they would normally use their phone. But
Well, I've looked into becoming a monk a few times, and that's essentially what it is. You decide to live inside a whole bunch of very strict rules and submit to a system of authority. It does simplify your life. There are appeals to it.
I'm sure it's I don't know. I'm not one to ever feel like I need another person to guide my morality. Like I'm responsible enough that if I say I'm going to make it a moral code of mine not to visit social media sites anymore. I just won't visit social media sites. I don't need a nanny to do it for me. But
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I think the idea here is that you don't trust your own judgment and you prefer to go with, say, some ancient rules that have been established for centuries.
ancient rules about cell phone usage that's been established for centuries.
Yeah, ancient rules about every
Yeah.
part of life.
Yeah.
I mean, you could, I know why the Amish do it too. That also looks pretty attractive. Just abandon all this modern stuff and just live on a farm with horses and grow apples
Actually,
and
that
live a
does
simple
sound
life.
really nice.
What's that?
That does sound really nice.
I know.
Yeah.
And they say this is great, and you people are just driving yourself nuts with your cars and TVs and computers and stuff. You should just, live on a farm and grow apples.
Yeah, but there's no radios or computers on those farms, so I would not like it too
Precisely.
much. Yeah.
Well,
I would not like it, but other people might.
I
It,
understand the appeal.
it would be good for a week, and then I'd be like, I miss my computer. I miss my radio.
Well, that could happen. Yes. All right. And anyway, so this one is another thing that's sort of like that 15-year-old Python bug. You say, why did they never do this? So if you turn on Windows file sharing, then you can now try to crack passwords by just making multiple guesses to try to guess the passwords that sent up to the file share. And Microsoft has finally just now said, hey, we could rate limit that. So now every attempt to log into a file share, you have to wait 2 seconds before you try again. And that will have an enormous effect because before you could do like hundreds or thousands of guesses per second. So this is one of those things, in retrospect, why didn't they do this 20 years ago? But it's good that they're doing it now. And so they're even talking about, there was another one I saw kind of related. Azure Active Directory has a two-factor authentication system, and you can have account lockout after 10 guesses. You can turn it on, but it just doesn't work, and they don't tell you. The button to turn it on is left over from an earlier version of the product, and that earlier version has been abandoned, and the new version no longer has that feature, but the button is still there. So many people turn it on and blithely think they've got this defensive feature, but it doesn't actually work. So anyway, it's good to see a step forward in Microsoft security. And let's go back to you with Starlink.
Yeah, so we finally figured out why Elon Musk and SpaceX have been launching like 60 Starlink satellites a week. So PC Magazine has an article talking about Starlink speeds. So when Starlink originally came on the market, it had about 90 megabits per second download speed. It has gone down since then as people have signed up for the service to 62.5 megabits per second, and is continuing to go down. And so there's some graphs down here showing the various performance. And as you can see, it is going down, trending downward. This is, of course, just simply due to congestion. There's just not enough Starlink satellites to handle the people already. And as the service gets more and more usage, the satellites are going to get more and more congested, essentially. So that's if you're wondering like why they're like all these like pretty much half our sky is filled with Starlink satellites. This is why it's already being congested. So
is there some limit to how many satellites they can put up?
In theory, yes. In practice, probably not too much. I mean, you would have to put up a lot of satellites. And most of these are very low Earth orbit, so they're designed to go down after a few years. So they can, as long as they go down after like 5 years on their own due to atmospheric drag, they can keep putting stuff up. It starts becoming a bigger problem if they put things in higher orbit. Then you start running into like Kessler syndrome and stuff like that. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's right. I think the same thing happened with cable internet about 15 years ago. Too many people would get it in the same neighborhood and it would dilute it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Except this is worldwide.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not living up to the promise that I think a lot of people were under the impression that, oh, it's really fast internet. You can get in the middle of it anywhere. And people sort of assumed it was going to be sort of the steady state of fast internet, but it's turning out not to be the case at all.
Well, and you could say they're just successful at selling enough of it to meet the capacity.
Right. Now, if only there was a competitor to Starlink that could keep up with the demand, like something named that rhymes with Viper.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it reminds me, I was just hearing criticism of Biden's the Anti-Inflation Act, which has encouragement for electric vehicles. And they say it turns out that a lot of those government subsidies for electric vehicles, a lot of companies won't qualify for them. But on the other hand, electric vehicles are selling out faster than anybody can make them. There's a huge backlog to buy them. So you don't actually need a financial incentive to sell electric vehicles. The demand currently greatly exceeds the supply.
What they really need to do, though, is give subsidies for people that are in lower income brackets who want to buy an electric car because they're still way too expensive for the average American.
Although I read a story article that said that if you take the entire cost of owning it for 5 years, they're cheaper than gas vehicles because people don't consider the repair bills, which apparently are much worse for gas vehicles.
But that's true. The other thing, too, of course, is that if you're living on a budget, thinking ahead, planning out 5 years is not as important as I have a job to get to next week and I need a car now. There's different economic realities when you're living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, I've heard that called the poor tax. I mean, poor people have to pay higher amounts for everything because they can't afford to take the large size or the long view of things.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, that's it for this one, I think.
I was going to say, I like the expression, it's expensive being poor.
Yes. There's a similar one. I remember it's very expensive being a woman. They said women's clothes are much more expensive. They have this expensive cosmetics and stuff. And they end up paying much more for the simple things in life.
Not only that, there's a ton more just basic needs, like tampons and stuff, which are like fully taxed. They for some reason they at least they were. In a lot of places they're fully taxed. So,
but men need beer and shotgun shells and stuff.
Yeah,
that's expensive too.
That is.
All right. I'll stop this one, and I will be back on Tuesday.